I'm gonna attempt to reanimate one of anime's worst animated scenes. That's if you can even call it animated. And that is, of course, Blue Lock Season 2, Episode 2. I'm gonna take you through every step of how I made this 11-cut animation entirely by myself. No team, no studio, just me, myself, and an insane amount of caffeine. This is my most requested video ever, so the pressure to not fumble this was unbelievable. I knew I had to go all in because this scene deserved way better than what we got. It is truly time to lock in. This video is brought to you by Squarespace, the all-in-one platform that makes building a website extremely easy. But more on them later. Before I even touched the animation, which I knew was gonna be a ton of work and extremely mentally draining, I had to gather all possible references to make my life much easier. So I gathered images of Rin, Isagi, and Chigari, since these are going to be the main characters of this animation. I also went through both the anime and the manga and broke down each shot to brainstorm ideas on what would be the best possible direction I could go with when I do my own version. Since the anime barely animated the scene in the first place, I wanted to make sure my version actually has movement while keeping the artistic appeal and not completely cutting down the detailed character designs, which is going to be challenging, but I think I could pull it off. Once I had all my references, I moved on to the storyboard. Since the anime barely had any movement in the scene, I had to plan out on how to make it feel more alive while staying true to the original art style. I broke the sequence down into key shots, focusing on framing and pacing to make sure everything flows well and feels seamless. I decided to make some key changes to the adaptation and add extra cuts that better the overall flow. Ultimately, for this scene, I came up with 11 cuts, which will hopefully get me to the result that I want. With the storyboard totally finished now, it was time to tackle the part that was either gonna make this animation look insane or completely ruin my life, and that is, of course, CGI. For this animation, I wanted to make the stadium and the ball in Blender. In the anime, they're also CGI, but for some reason, in some shots, the characters themselves are in CGI, which I always found it to look pretty funky. So we will most definitely stay away from that. First thing I needed to make was the Blue Lock Stadium. Since I'm not a professional at Blender, I'm actually quite trash. I had to spend an unhealthy amount of time watching tutorials and chatting with ChatGPT to learn how to do this shit. Thankfully, I was able to find the stadium of the mobile game to which I used as a reference for this 3D model. I decided that since I'm gonna strategically use my camera angles to make everything look seamless, I would only make a portion of the stadium instead of the whole thing, which will very much get the job done without causing me to go through extra work. After texturing everything and having an existential crisis, I think I had finally made something usable. Next up was making the ball, so that I didn't have to animate it over and over again. I yet again modeled it in 3D and slapped on cell shading to make it blend seamlessly with the animation. This way, it's gonna move naturally, stay consistent, and most importantly, I won't have to draw the same circle over and over again. That looks pretty good. With the CG fully done, this project was coming together nicely. However, this joy did not hold up for much longer because the real challenge was up ahead, animating everything. And this entire thing was as tedious and annoying as you could possibly imagine. Blood, sweat, and tears truly went into this. So stay tuned for the process that allowed everything to come together and the final product at the end of the video. You're not gonna want to miss this. So as you guys know, I'm a one-man team, and this animation shit takes forever. These last like 8 months, I've just been going at this like non-stop all by myself, and I'm just like so exhausted and tired, and I've been trying to figure out how I can make my process faster and easier on myself. The only thing I could think of that could possibly help me is trying out Kakani again. I think it might be worth it to give it another try. Kakani is an animation software that auto-generates in between frames using vector-based interpolation, so it's not AI. So instead of drawing every frame manually, you just draw the key poses and it fills in the gaps. In theory, it saves time, but if your strokes aren't clean or drawn in the right order, the in-betweens can look like shit, meaning you're just gonna spend a lot of time fixing them, which isn't a time saver at all. I don't think it's gonna be ideal for every single cut, but I think that if I'm able to use it correctly, it's gonna be able to help me big time. Before diving straight into the hardest cuts, I wanted to sort of ease in by getting a feel of both Blue Lock's art style and how to actually use Kakani without losing my sanity. So I started off with cut 3, which is a slow motion shot of Isagi running. I dragged my storyboard drawing into Kakani, and since this program works with vectors, it requires you to draw lines in the same direction and order for the in-betweens to be able to generate properly. For a simple motion like this, I only needed 2 drawings, but for something more complex like a head turn, which I'm going to be doing later, I would need at least 3 for it to look good. Yeah, I don't like it. As I was thinking of what I could do to make this look better, I came to the conclusion that generating in-betweens on 1s, which is 1 new drawing per frame, made everything look too robotic. So I adjusted it to run on 3s, 1 drawing every 3 frames, to make it feel more organic and anime-like, and that small change made a massive difference. But then I faced a massive problem with Kakani. I don't think I've ever in my life used a program that crashes anywhere near as frequently as Kakani. Not even Premiere Pro is this bad, and that shit is bad. But thankfully, I've been traumatized enough enough by crashing programs to prepare for this annoying struggle, so I set the autosave to every minute instead of the default 4 minutes so that I don't rope max by the end of this project. But it only got worse. Coloring in Kakani might be one of the most frustrating things I think I've ever experienced in my entire life. It just would not fill in. And when I say there are no in-depth tutorials on YouTube about this program, I mean it. And I was not about to sit here, read a manual in the Gargantuan 2025. So instead, I had a very, very bright idea of my own. I imported the PDF of the manual into ChatGPT and just asked it every question I had. And that honestly worked. But even then, the way I actually figured out how to fix the problem was to tweak settings for hours until I finally figured out that Kakani lets you disable the line strokes, revealing microscopic gaps that were stopping the colors from filling. Like, this is actually unbelievable. But once I patched that up, I tested the auto coloring tool and it was okay. It still took me decades to finish, but at last cut 3 was done. I feel like my lack of understanding of the program sort of made this take a lot longer than it normally would have, but after all that suffering, I did end up understanding Kakani a lot better, so for now, I'll give it another chance, but you're on thin ice. Now let's go back to cut 1, which features Rin aggressively placing his foot on the soccer ball. But first, I'm gonna show you how easy it was to create my own website using this video's sponsor, Squarespace, the all-in-one platform that makes building your personal brand extremely simple. I started off with Squarespace's Design Intelligence, which basically does like half the work for you. It uses AI to help you create a personalized website based on your style, so instead of spending hours tweaking settings, I was able to build something clean and professional super fast. This was made even easier thanks to their flexible website templates. I picked a portfolio template that looks super clean, and within minutes, I had a website where I could showcase my art and animation projects. You can even swap out images, change the layout, and make it your own without coding a single thing. So if you've been thinking about setting up a portfolio, blog, or online store, you can get started by going to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, use squarespace.com/Bunny to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. I wanted the ball to roll in using 3D, but since I wanted to do that later, I just took a quick screenshot of where I wanted the ball to end up and jumped straight into animating. Since this cut didn't need a ton of in-betweens, I fully animated it in Clip Studio Paint instead of Kakani. I sketched out the final pose, copied and pasted it because I didn't really feel like redrawing it, it just wasn't necessary, and used the transform tool to shift it into place. And yeah, if it looks like I'm taking a lot more shortcuts than usual, it's because I am. This kind of work is usually done by an entire team, and I still have every other part of the process to do by myself. So if I just hyper focus on one thing and try to make it perfect, everything else is gonna fall apart. The way I do things, I sort of rely on every other aspect of the process to bring everything together and not just hyper focus on one and try to make just that one thing perfect. To add some extra bounce, I delayed the shoelaces slightly when the foot landed, making the movement feel a lot more natural. Then for extra impact, I added dust when the shoe slammed onto the ball. And finally, I went back to Blender, animated the ball rolling in, threw everything into After Effects, and boom, this cut came out beautiful. But even though it came out beautiful, for some odd reason, I was starting to feel a lot of resistance when it came to drawing and animating. Like I mentioned earlier, I've been starting to feel pretty burnt out. It's like I want to draw and try to do my best, but my mind simply does not allow me to. So I did the unthinkable, and I allowed myself to rest for a couple of days to see if I could get back to the groove of things.
Guys, I've been going at it pretty hard, I'm not gonna lie. I'm feeling the burnout pretty hard right now. So let's hope I can finish this for real.
To change things up mentally for me, instead of going completely in order cut by cut, I thought that it would be interesting to switch up the process to allow my brain to breathe a little and not have this process feel super routine because I'm actually on the brink of losing my mind. So I decided to roughly animate every single cut at once, and then later on, I can clean everything up and color it. And this was probably the best thing I could have done. Not only did this speed up everything, but it felt different, which I liked. To keep everything organized, I did all of the cuts I was gonna do in Kakani so that I don't have to keep on switching back and forth between software. Starting off with cut 2, which is basically a little standoff between Rin, and I don't know this dude's name, I'll be honest with you. In the anime, this was done with a still frame, as you're gonna notice a pattern, but to add some movement, I made Rin sort of like go from being hunched over to standing straight while making the big dude sort of slide in a little bit. And with the power of Kakani, this was done easily with only 2 frames. Cut 4 was a similar story. This app is really good for head turns in my opinion, and I wanted to do a slow head turn which would normally take forever, doing all the in-betweens manually, so this was truly a time saver in every way possible. This cut right here is not in the anime. They did like a still frame split screen of Isagi and Rin, but I decided it would be far better to split it into 2 slow motion cuts. I was thinking of doing 3 frames for this one, but 2 worked just fine. Cut 6 features a subtle head movement from the big guy to showcase his shot from the incredible back and forth passing between Rin and Isagi. I can't say these names. Rin is also going to be seen in the background kicking the ball. The anime did like some weird ass PNG still frames which look funky as f in my opinion, but I think adding this slight movement really adds a lot more than you can imagine. Cut 7 features more of the same, with Isagi sort of catching the pass in slow motion and kicking the ball up in the air a little bit to get ready to pass it back to Rin. Finally, cut 11, which is the final shot of the animation. It features Shigari follow through kicking the ball away and stopping the pass of Isagi Hisagi to Rin. All of these cuts were done with just 2 drawings, which was a very fascinating experience, and I'm grateful to this app that I once hated on, because it made this animation process different and cool. Now it's time to go back to Clip Studio Paint to finish the cuts I have left. Starting with cut 5, which features Rin and Hisagi passing the ball to each other while the big guy is in the middle. Since this cut has 3 full body characters moving, I made my life a lot easier by animating them individually instead of trying to handle all 3 of these grown men at once. Pause. I wanted to make this shot sort of like a pan down, so I set up a long vertical canvas and focused more on movement rather than perfecting every individual drawing. For the ball, I spun it in Blender, masked it out in After Effects, and keyframed it at the same frame rate as the 2D animation. Some of the frames look hella goofy if you freeze them, but honestly, it looks pretty good in motion, and it gets the job done pretty well. With this cut being done, it's time to move on to cut 8, which features Hisagi blinking and his hair waving. This cut is pretty simple, but I wanted to make it feel rough to match Blue Lock's raw aesthetic, so I decided to go with pretty rough strokes, and instead of using a smooth 4-hair frame loop, I cut it down to just 3 frames, making the movement feel a little choppier while still selling the illusion of the hair waving. This cut is nowhere to be seen in the anime or in the manga. I sort of just added it as a transition to build up what's about to happen. Cut 9 is up next, which has Rin quickly running past the guy with purple hair. The anime kept this cut super basic, so I sort of wanted to add some extra anticipation to make it feel more dynamic. So instead of just having Rin casually run past the defender, I made him do sort of like a little jump, almost like a fake out, to make it look like he's juking the guy before blowing past him. At this point, I was really starting to understand why the Blue Lock production fell apart. These character designs are insanely detailed. Even though I simplified them compared to the official anime, this still took way more time and effort than I expected. But after all that struggle, I think it turned out pretty fire. Cut 10 features Hisagi passing the ball to Rin, and Chigari comes in and kicks it away. In the anime, this cut was literally just a PNG, like there's actually no animation at all. So it was up to me to give it the justice it deserves. I started with a close-up, slow motion shot of Hisagi's foot right before it makes contact with the ball. The ball itself is spinning slowly, but I'm gonna do that later on. Then as he kicks the ball, the shot is gonna hold for a moment before the camera pans out, leading into Chigari's entrance. From the bottom of the screen, his foot is gonna slide in, building anticipation before he absolutely launches the ball. Most of the magic in this cut came from compositing. The way the CGI background and the ball moves really sells the impact and makes the shot look unique and interesting. And after all that, it ended up looking lovely and gets the job done exactly as intended. And just like that, the animation process was finished. But I'm not done quite yet. I still have to do the compositing and the audio, which are 2 beasts of their own. My main goal with the compositing this time around was all about making the 3D and 2D elements blend seamlessly so that the CGI doesn't look out of place. Since Blue Lock has such a sharp, high energetic aesthetic, I decided to use my strengths to my advantage here. The way I was able to make everything look seamless was with rim lighting, basically adding a soft highlight to the characters so that they pop against the background and don't feel like PNG slapped onto the scene, and also adjusting the frame rate of the CG ball accordingly. I also added motion blur onto the ball when needed to make the movement feel natural. For an extra touch, I threw in some subtle optical flares in the slow motion shots. Nothing too crazy, but it made the scenes look prettier just how I like it. I then brought everything into DaVinci Resolve for color correction and of course, the audio. First, I isolated the vocals from the original scene, making sure they were clean so they wouldn't clash with the new sound mix. Then I hopped on Epidemic Sound to find similar background music to the one that's used in the anime, because I am truly not trying to get a copyright strike. But the real magic was in the sound effects. I intentionally picked out the sound effects to make the scene far more impactful. Using the Saturn plugin, I added saturation to beef up the impact, adding weight to the action. Then I carefully balanced everything out so nothing overpowered the vocals or music. And I gotta say, this is probably my proudest work of animation and sound design I think I've ever done. So I really hope you guys like it as much as I do. And just like that, this project is done. This whole project tested my patience, my skill, and most of all, my fucking sanity. But in the end, I feel like I pushed through and created something that I could be proud of. I tried some new things, I mixed 3D and 2D in ways I haven't done before, and most importantly, I think I did a good job reanimating this scene. Obviously, it's never gonna look studio level, but I think it has its little charm and I was able to get my ideas out there. And we hit 100,000 subscribers. I can't thank you guys enough for supporting me through this journey. Every single one of you have made my childhood dream a reality, and I am very, very grateful to all of you. But for now, I want all of us to sit back and enjoy the final animation. Let's go!
リンの欲しい距離感、タイミング、俺とお前が共存すれば初見で止めるのはまず無理だろ。ここだ、最終ライン。外へ抜けるお前へのラストパス。